Shabbat Shalom, I'm Robert Barr.
And I'm Aya Pillsbury.
And we are delighted that you're joining us for this Shabbat service. We're going to start with a reading and then explanation.
The day flows into one another without interruption. Time races on. The Sabbath is our means to divert time, a stepping off point, pausing with friends and with loved ones to observe, then rejoice in the wonder-filled coincidence of living. There can be a sense of pleasure in every given breath, blessed with tastes to savor and warmth to give and to receive, bestowed with gifts of sight and sound. We are obliged to cherish and revel in each smile, in every musical note.
The Sabbath also awakens us to the silence between notes. It speaks of contemplation, the quiet delight of literature, of unhurried walks, of rare conversations. The Sabbath can be our interlude, our ritual pause in this lively current, our signal to step more lightly, to appreciate more profoundly, to dive more deeply into the questions that life is asking. So, Robert Barr and Aya Pillsbury, and we are here at Congregation Beth Adam in Loveland, Ohio. Congregation Beth Adam, we're about to celebrate our 36th anniversary. Founding Rabbi Aya is a rabbinic student at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, a fifth year
yes,
student.
recently a fifth year.
That's really a big deal. And it's really exciting. It's nice to have students from the college working with us and being part of our community. Beth Adam has been a congregation that's really been pushing the envelope, really challenging old assumptions, asking bold questions, looking at a way to create a new voice of Judaism that speaks to who we are as contemporary Jews, really very much in the footsteps of the founders of Reform Judaism who were doing that very same thing in their generation. We continue that. How do we rewrite services? They were rewriting services. Rethinking theology. They were rethinking theology. Bringing sciences. They were bringing the science of their age in. And so that's what Congregation Beth Adam is about. And then we have the internet, which is right. That's which they didn't have. They had newspapers. We have the internet. We still have newspapers to allow our voice to spread beyond the walls of our sanctuary. And we're delighted that you're joining us. Some of you are watching live at 6 o'clock. Others will watch in the archives. We know lots of people do that. We also actually are pre-recording. Aya's been doing a lot of traveling, and the reason I wanted to pre-record the service, you've done some very interesting things, and I hope you're going to find it as interesting what Aya's been doing as I have, and it's a conversation that we're going to have in a minute after we light the candles.
The candles of Shabbat stand before us, waiting to meet the flame, longing to share their warmth, and ready to shed their light. Like those who came before us, like all people, we find comfort and fear in flame's endless swirl of fascination, mystery, and awe. Like those who came before us, like all people, we are graced with the desire and the will to understand. So we continue our ancestors' search for answers, pushing away the darkness of ignorance. The flames they saw as magic and beyond all comprehension become flames of knowledge and of hope. But still, we look with wonder, inspired by their beauty and their power. We embrace the flames of Shabbat. We embrace the light, our vessel of mystery and of understanding. As we light our Shabbat candles, we celebrate our journey, our quest, and our moments of peace.
May the light of our people shine. May the light of Shabbat cast its warmth in our homes. May these candles burn with respect for all who push beyond the bonds of ignorance, for all who seek justice, for all who build community. May these candles burn with memory of all who came before us. May we draw on the many ways our people have given voice to their ideas and values. May we add our own insight to their glow. Baruch ha'or ba'olam, blessed is the light within the world. Baruch ha'or ba'adam, blessed is the light within each person. Baruch ha'or ba'Shabbat, blessed is the light of the Sabbath. So as I said, we're pre-recording because Aya's been on the road a lot. You've been in and out of Cincinnati, and I wanted to grab you and really record and share with everyone this recent class that you took, because it was such an interesting conversation. You explored some issues that I think are really important. And so that's what we're doing today. So we're going to talk about the Jews and the
South and the Civil War. But actually, the class was a little bit more complicated.
Okay.
So I took an intensive about the early documents of Reform Judaism through the American Jewish Archives and with the generosity of the Ackerman Family Fund at Hebrew Union College, which is really exciting because it actually brought together students from all 3 stateside campuses.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So we had people from New York, from Cincinnati, and LA, which changes things. We all have our own definition of Judaism, and within each kind of Judaism, everyone has their own definition of what that means. So for me, it was extra exciting to see what did the people who deliberately set out to create a new Judaism, what were they thinking? What was important to them? And so this focused on the period around like the 1820s to the 1840s-ish. Hebrew Union College was officially started in the 1880s. I think it was 1885.
75.
75. Excuse me.
1875. I know that because that's their phone number.
Oh, very smart.
That's how I remember it.
And then they started the Union of Reform Judaism as well, which used to have a different name, and also the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which is the Union of Reform Rabbis. And all of these 3 institutions were started by one person, Isaac Mayer Wise. And he actually set out to create an American Judaism.
Right.
He didn't want it just to be reform. He thought America was this new land of opportunity, the only country in the entire world where Jews didn't need to be emancipated. We always had rights, just like everyone who was white had rights. And that also raises some really interesting questions for me. So I grew up in California. When we talked about complicated issues of race and sensitivity, we talked about the Spanish-American War and Native Americans and the missions. We didn't talk about slavery.
So when you came to Cincinnati and you're sitting, just so you know, if you've never come to Cincinnati, I know the first time you came, if you flew, you land in Kentucky, which is very confusing. Since Greater Cincinnati Airport is in Kentucky, and I remember the first time I came, I thought I missed my stop. I couldn't figure out, planes don't have stops, but I couldn't figure out what had happened. And so Cincinnati is right on the border of the North and the South. So it plays, and in fact, there's the Underground Railroad Museum. It's a wonderful museum. The Freedom Center is in Cincinnati facing the South, because it has to do with the idea, it's sort of playing against the idea that the slaves, as they saw the Ohio River, that represented...
This was the last point. They literally swam across the river, and once they got to Ohio, they could be free.
So it's a very significant. If you ever come here, you're really going to the museum. So go ahead.
So what's really interesting is the 2 biggest centers of early American Reform Judaism are in Cincinnati, which is right, as we said, right in the north, but barely in the north, and in Charleston, which is the South, very much the South, and was in fact the seat of the Confederacy, where the letter that when the Confederate States of America declared their independence, the letter was written in Charleston.
Wow. And so the Jewish community is wrapped up with this. And so so part of what you were doing was beyond the specifics of Reform Judaism, you were exploring the Jewish community as it related to the whole issue of slavery.
Yes, and to the context of where we live and how you can have radical values for your time, and still, looking back 100 years later, it's really problematic in all sorts of different ways. So in Charleston, for example, white women could own shops. There was this whole core of white female merchants who were business owners, plantation owners, did all of these things, had all these opportunities that white women did not have other places, and especially not in the North. And one of the reasons they had these amazing opportunities is because of slavery, because there were so many more black slaves than there were white people, that the white people were scared about their power and were like, anyone who looks kind of like us, you get to do whatever you want. And so for me, it created these really complicated questions about what are our values, how do they fit into a larger context, and how does religion inform them?
Right, and additionally, because as you and I were talking when we started talking about this, was also the evolution of values, because the values obviously of Reform Judaism and the values of the Jewish community changed in relation to slavery, as most of America changed over time. How does that happen? I think it's an incredibly interesting question, and there were rabbis on both sides of the issue. There are rabbis who preach sermons that would say slavery is acceptable based upon...
Not even acceptable, that it was in fact a divine mandate, because this is the world we live in, this is what the world looks like, and let's not forget, there's slavery in the Bible.
Right.
And yes, slavery looks different, it's more like indentured servitude, but it also is straight up slavery.
Right.
And one of the things that was the most surprising to me was seeing how complicated the relationships were between slave owner and slave sometimes. Like, there were plaques about how the slave owners loved their slaves and how it was this beautiful familial relationship, which as an outsider
Seems incredibly bizarre.
I can't even understand it. And yet, we also, different people have people who clean their houses or people who do all sorts of different services for us in different ways. And you can have a great working relationship with people, or it can be incredibly exploitive. And so it raises the question of, is it even possible to have a moral slavery? Like, I can't even say that without freaking out.
Right. So
and yet they were completely grounded in their religious values, and
religion, it justified it.
Yeah.
But on the other side too, there were the folks who argued against slavery, also using the Bible.
Totally. And I'm way more comfortable with that argument.
Right. So
that makes sense to me.
Right.
And then there's other people like Isaac Mayer Wise who said we shouldn't get involved. That's someone else's problem. And Isaac Mayer Wise is the person who founded Hebrew Union College and all of these major institutions for Reform Judaism.
So did you talk about Wise? Was Wise trying to stay out of it because he recognized that for him, as somebody who's trying to start a Reform or American Judaism, to get into that debate he was going to upset somebody.
Yeah.
And so rather than upsetting anybody, he said, this is not a topic I'm going to address.
Exactly. And looking at where he was, Cincinnati was right in the middle.
Right.
And so it was more definitely on the side of anti-slavery than slavery, but also pretty neutral in the sense of, and that's an important thing for us to remember, is politics matter, and there are consequences to our values. And it's really easy for me, I'll speak for myself, to look back on previous generations and just say, what were these people thinking? Right. How could they care about being good people, making the world a better place, and do these things? But the truth is, morality is a collective agreement. Most people stay within these strictures.
And it was so interesting because we're sort of focusing on, for the moment, we were talking about sort of Reform Judaism and Judaism, and how its relation to slavery. But you think about the founders of our nation, who were incredibly progressive, who were pushing boundaries that had never been pushed before. The fact that we had a freedom of religion in America,
the pursuit of happiness is a value. It's something that people are supposed to be able to do here. What other place cares about happiness?
Right. Well, right.
It's intangible.
Absolutely. There's that. There's the freedom of religion, which meant for Jews we didn't need to be emancipated. We were free. We were full and equal citizens. But yet at the same time, they didn't see slavery as an issue, and it's a really powerful reminder how morality changes, how it's a collective, and how it changes over time. And we look back. We don't excuse them, But it also it forces us to ask the question: are there things in our own generation that we find acceptable that in 20 years or 120 years, people say, how did that society allow that to occur? They knew it was happening.
Totally.
Why didn't they see what was occurring before them?
And Charleston was one of the wealthiest cities in the country before the Civil War because of slavery.
Right.
You know, there are lots of things about the way our country is still structured that things are only the way they are because someone benefits. And so I think that it is an important question for us to ask in terms of what are we willing to give up to help other people who maybe don't have the access that we have or don't have opportunities, or what opportunities do I need? Where do I need help?
Right. Right. I mean, there's some. That's why I really wanted to share this with everybody, because I think that the class raises so many important historical issues, but they're not just historical issues. They have to force us to begin to think about how does our religious identity inform what we're thinking? Do we use it to, I mean, certainly, whether it was the pro-slavery, the anti-slavery groups, they were what we would call cherry-picking the text to be able to justify it, and they really weren't necessarily owning their decisions, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So the question always becomes for us is, what's informing our morality? How do we challenge it within ourselves? How do we have good conversations?
And how does it continue to grow and evolve and find nuance and discover different aspects of it?
And while I hesitate to say this, given that we're in a very political time in American history right now, right in this very moment, those questions that you were dealing with in the class really are contemporary questions as well. Is how do we view different groups of people? How do we include different groups of people? What's the justification?
Yeah.
And who gets to claim what is and is not a justifiable reason to do something?
And it also speaks to just how important each person's understanding and voice is, because collectively it transforms the experience and transforms what is going on. Like, things change because of people. We make them happen. Things don't just stay the same because that's the way they are. Right.
People make it change, or people make it stay the same.
Exactly. They actively try to make it the same. Yeah. So
were there any specific rabbis that rose up who spoke for or against it, whose names we should even think about?
So David Einhorn, who was Isaac Mayer Wise's big rival when they were trying to figure out who was going to be the voice of American Judaism. And Isaac Mayer Wise wanted it to be American Judaism, a Judaism that would just be for everyone, as opposed to Einhorn was like, let's be radical, I've got awesome values, and let's go for it. And in many ways, during his own lifetime, Einhorn wasn't as successful. He didn't start all of our institutions, but his ideology won out. Slavery, his first pulpit was in Baltimore, and he was super active in talking about the importance of abolition and the end of slavery, and it was actually so much of an issue that the synagogue had to guard his house.
Really? Wow.
And they had to guard the synagogue because there are all these riots, and Baltimore also was right on the edge.
Right.
And so he actually had to leave his pulpit because he left because of safety, and then they tried to get him to come back because they loved him so much. And he said, yeah, I'll come back, but I'm going to keep talking about all the stuff I was talking about before. And they said, we just can't do it. It's unsafe for us as a community.
Well, it's interesting, too, because there were rabbis during the civil rights movement who went down to the South. I mean, and that was an issue. So, which rabbis speak out when they choose to speak? Emil
G. Hirsch also used to call out his people from the pulpit. He was a famous rabbi in Chicago during the industrialization process. And so he had a lot of congregants who owned sweatshops and had terrible working conditions. And apparently he used to, from the bima, say, you in the third row, stop being terrible and start getting your act together. And we say that it can't be done anymore, but...
Well, it's interesting. The role of clergy has changed. The role and society is, how clergy and religion interact with society is a debate, particularly among sort of, I think, sort of liberal religious institutions, what's the role? But I think that what you were raising was so fascinating is sort of this moment in American history, and the moment in American Jewish history, when Wise is trying to create something new. That's why it was called the Union of American Hebrew Congregations and the Central Conference of American Rabbis. And I think his first prayer book was called
Minhag America, which is the American custom.
Right. So he really was doing it. And the word, if you notice, Hebrew Union College, Central Conference of American Rabbis, the Union of American Hebrew Congregation, the word Jew was not a popular term at that period of time.
No.
The word Hebrew was being used. So Wise was doing this one philosophic movement of openness and freedom that was really what made Reform Judaism so strong, the idea of autonomy, that each of us has a personal choice. And yet at the same time, he was watching this, what we know as a horrific piece of American history, slavery, and didn't speak out against it either because it was not politically proper for him to do that. He felt like it was going to challenge, or he didn't see it as the problem that we see it as today.
But that's where an individual voice, you sitting wherever you are, participating in our service, you can hold people accountable. And things only change when lots of individual people hold the powers that be accountable for their actions and for their values.
And making people hold it accountable based upon what value set.
Exactly, grounded in our values, which is why we're here at our Jewish community.
Right, that it isn't the Bible that tells us what to do.
Because it can tell us to do anything.
If it can tell you to have slaves and not have slaves, it clearly can tell you to do anything. So we can look back at our ancestors and see what values they held, which ones still resonate with us, but then we need to ground it in a value set that recognizes ultimately that human beings are responsible for creating the values that we hold, that we can't claim divine intervention is telling us this is right or this is wrong, which puts a lot more responsibility on people.
Yeah, and it's exciting because we have a job to do. And it's totally doable if we all work together to make it happen.
Well, great. I hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did. So there's stuff to explore, to learn about. The American Jewish Archives is...
Yeah, if you ever want to learn anything about American Jewish history, go to aja.org, the American Jewish Archives, email an archivist. They would love to talk to you. They have all sorts of resources for any kinds of programs, or just you're an individual person who's interested in anything related to American Judaism. Let them know. They'd be thrilled to hear from you.
That's really good. And just to remind folks that Dr. Gary Zola, who is your professor, we recorded with him. He wrote a book about Lincoln, about Lincoln's role and how they called him Rabbi Abraham. I can't think of the title of his book off the side. So you can also look at that, go back into our archives and see our conversation with Dr. Rabbi Gary Zola about Abraham Lincoln. He's done a lot of work on that. So the American Jewish,
AJA.org, American Jewish Archives.
Great. Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Maybe as I is doing some other traveling and other conversations, we'll bring her back to focus on that as well. We're going to continue with our challah reading and then our wine. So if you'll...
At this moment, we come together to welcome Shabbat. We take pause, breathe in life, and reflect on the importance of each of our lives. We feel the touch of spirit on the body, the warmth of fellow human beings. We embrace our uniqueness and our diversity, our capacity to create, to explore, to change the world. In sharing the challah, this Sabbath bread, we nourish our spirit. We're connected with each other, with our ancestors, with the earth, the sky, and the whole of nature. Baruch Amal Kapenu, blessed is the work of our hands. Baruch Chazon Ha'adam, blessed is the vision of our minds. Baruch Lechem Ha'aretz, blessed is the bread of the earth.
And then if you have some wine or some juice, join with me. Life's a wondrous gift. The mind observes with awe and appreciation flows from the heart. Life's joyful bounties are unveiled. Such treasures abound in ordinary moments. A familiar face, the simplicity of a smile, tender kisses, the warmth and security of a hug. enchanting melodies, the grace of dance, the coolness of sculpted marble. A remarkable story. The complexity of atomic structure, thunder's reverberation, the shimmering of the rainbow, intoxicating rose petals. These moments become opportunities to affirm that which is good. As we lift this cup, a tribute to life's enchantments, may we find joy and contentment in our human endeavors. Bruchim hachayim ba'olam, blessed is the life within the world. Bruchim hachayim ba'adam, blessed is the life within each person. And so we say, l'chaim, to life.
Chaim.
Ooh, juice. It's really sweet. It is. Ooh. Okay, so thank you, Aya, for doing that. Really fascinating. So continue exploring. We can continue learning. aja.org if you want more American Jewish history. Just a slice of the American Jewish experience. I'm really glad you shared that. I found it fascinating. For those, really check out our Facebook page. We're always posting new stuff. Go to our website if you haven't looked for a while. We're going to be off. We won't be doing live services in July and part of August. Travels, things that we talked about, doing this Israel trip and things like that. But you can always watch and you can always share with each other. This is a community of people, whether we're watching services together in real time or not. Our Jewish community is a community of people around the world, and we are delighted that you're participating with us. You can always write us at rabbi@ourjewishcommunity.org. And we close with our final words. May we know blessings those who are near, and may we know blessings those who are far. And may the Sabbath bring its goodness to everyone soon, wherever they are. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
You can always write us at rabbi@ourjewishcommunity.org. And we close with our final words. May we know blessings those who are near, and may we know blessings those who are far. And may the Sabbath bring its goodness to everyone soon, wherever they are. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
You can always write